"Shouldn't you be asleep?" he whispered in my ear. "Trying to steal something? Please, let me go." I shivered. "What if I say no?" He laughed. "And kick you to the ground just like I kicked that pup of yours. That is it." Hera growled at the mention of Amara. "Let me at the bastard." I didn't fight her this time as she took control. Her canines got elongated as her claws came out. She grabbed a hold of the beta's hand and twisted it. He yelped in both shock and pain. Hera took the opportunity and pushed him to the floor before pouncing on him and slashing his face with her claws, creating bloodied lines. "You mutt," he growled, releasing his powerful aura and pushing her off him with so much force. We hit the wall and Hera immediately receded, giving me back control. I tried scrambling to my feet to run off, but he was before me in a flash and grabbed me. "I am taking you to the Alpha," he barked. "No, please," I begged as he dragged me up the stairs and to the Alpha's room. Alpha Titan was already outside the door, and my guess was that the beta had already mind-linked him. "What did she do now?" He rolled his eyes. "Your useless mate." He dropped me on the floor before the Alpha. "Did this." He pointed at his face. "I am sorry," I whimpered. "Shut up," Alpha Titan growled. "Get into the room and strip." I stood up and got into the room, fiddling with my clothes. "I will take it from here," I heard him say before he got into the room and closed the door behind him. "Oh, darling." He walked over to me, turning me to face him. "You are so in for it," he said before pouncing on me. I was bleeding between my legs and everywhere when he got off and grabbed the whip. The cold air blew against my skin and I shivered. "Oh, my dear, are you cold?" He mocked me before hitting me with the whip continuously, and as I screamed in pain, he enjoyed it more. "Please, Alpha," I begged. "Just kill me," I pleaded with him as the pain was too much. I didn't think I could survive it any longer. "Kill you and give you an easy end to your suffering." "No, dear, I wouldn't do that," he laughed. As he came to my level on the floor, he yanked one of my folded legs out. "Ugly bitch." He read out what his beta had written with "he knife, worthless slut." He laughed as he read the other words on the next leg. "I must say he did a pretty great job." He stood up. I swallowed as he watched me with hooded eyes, making me wonder what sort of torture he had next. "Get up and lay on the bed." I stood up as quick as I could on my weak legs and laid on the bed, not wanting to anger him further. I laid there with my face pressed downwards into the sheets. I wailed in tears as I felt a knife on my back. He was carving out words on my already open, wounded back. I didn't know what he was carving. I only cried, feeling the pain get more intense. I couldn't even scream, I was too weak. "I see you aren't screaming in pain," he grumbled. "I guess this doesn't hurt enough." He stabbed the knife into my back and I screamed. He pulled out the knife and repeated the act over and over again. "Just kill me already," I yelled out in pain. "Number, I have one more surprise for you." I heard the door open and someone walked in. I couldn't see who it was till I heard the voice. "Mummy." It was Amara. I was alarmed. I raised my head and looked at her standing in the room, clutching Fluffy as usual, as she stared at me, and the man whom she didn't know was her father. "What are you going to do to her?" I yelled at him. "Let her go." I didn't want him to kill her like he did to my father. "She is going to join us in the fun." He laughed as he beckoned to her. "Come here." She stood there, watching me as if seeking my permission. I said, "Come here, you mutt." He walked over to her angrily and slapped her across the face. She cried out and I had to act fast. I grabbed a syringe containing silver and wolfsbane from the bed shelf, got off the bed and immediately moved to him, stabbing him in the neck with it. "Bitch!" He turned, glaring at me, knowing what I had done, and then he grabbed my neck. I wasn't going down without. out a fight. He was already weaker now. I will end you this instant. He backed me up against the wall. Leave her alone, Amara cried as she ran up to us, hitting his leg. He kicked her away and turned to face me again. Just then, I reached out to the bedside lamp, lifted it and smashed it on his head. Alpha Titan fell to the ground. With a thump, I didn't waste time in grabbing Amara and running out of the room. I limp ran to the basement with her in my arms. I was still naked as I hadn't bothered with grabbing my clothes, and the cold air kept kissing my wounds, making me hiss in pain. I kept Amara down as soon as I got there and began packing all our belongings in the sack. There was no time. We needed to get out of here before Alpha Titan awoke. Someone is finally running away. Hera snickered. Hera, I do not need your satire right now. We need to leave as soon as possible. Can you heal? No. Way too weak, but we can manage with the wounds. I finished packing our things. Put on a simple gown and grabbed Amara. Where are we going? She asked as we crept out of the pack house. We are going far away from here, baby. I answered her as we continued moving. We left the house successfully and walked in the thick forest. I knew we were still on the pack grounds. We moved till we got closer and close to the borders after managing to evade the patrol members. When we got really close to the borders, I dropped Amara and the sack. I crouched down to her level, looking at her with her teary eyes and her tiny hands clutching Fluffy. Baby, I need you to do something for me, I told her. I need you to shift into your wolf. I want you to let Cora take over. Are we running away from this bad place? Yes, baby, we are. And we will finally be happy in a big house, with food and a daddy. I nodded at her, not wanting to dull her spirits. I didn't know if we were going to get comfort. I didn't know what the world had in store for us, but I knew that we had to run. She dropped Fluffy, and I helped her in sitting on the floor. You need to be focused and let Cora come through, okay? She nodded and sat there. Soon I saw her shifting, her tiny claws surfacing with pale silver fur and canines. She wasn't screaming like the first few times, and soon a beautiful pup with silver fur was standing on all fours before me. Cora. I smiled at her. I did it. She jumped, smiling happily. Amara and I did it. I stood up, smiling at her, and then it was time for me to do what I ought to do. I, Nyx Evander, an Omega of the Cormoon Pack, accept your rejection, Alpha Titan, and I choose to be a Rouge from this moment, so be it. And then I felt all connection and ties with them severe. I shifted into my wolf immediately and let Hera take control. She walked up to the sack. Pick Fluffy, Cora, she said, as she picked the sack in her mouth. Cora also did the same, with Fluffy. So, we are doing this? I asked Hera. It is about time. And with that, we moved, crossing the borders and running into the forest. We were Rouges. Hey, Del. We kept running even though we were tired. I didn't know how far we were from the pack, but I knew we had covered a considerable distance away from them. How come we are so fast? I asked Hera. I don't know, she said. I feel anxious. First, I am faster all of a sudden, and I can't keep this other feeling away. I am thirsty, Cora said, dropping Fluffy, and we had to stop. I need water. There is a stream not far away from here. I can hear it, Hera said to her. We would reach there in no time. We continued journeying till we reached the stream. There, we sat to drink water and rest. We need to leave here now. What if wild Rouges come? We would be in danger. That is right. Hera agreed with me and she stood up. She called Cora, and we began the journey again, not knowing exactly where we were going, just following the moon as it led us. The night got darker as we ran, and we had all began to feel tired. I felt pity on Cora as she wasn't used to this, and she was still so young. We went a little further and spotted a clearing. "We need to spend the night here," Hera said to me. "We might collapse if we go any further." "Okay." Cora is so tired. We dropped our stuff and not caring to shift back into our human form. We fell under a tree as we planned to spend the night there. We were about to sleep when we heard rustling of bushes, and I could feel Hera's excitement again. "Calm down, Hera," I growled. The rustling got more noisy, and she stood up. There, out of the bushes jumped out 6 huge-looking wolves. They weren't rouges. I knew it. They looked like trained pack warriors, and they were extremely huge. They looked at us furiously. As they snarled, "What are we going to do?" I asked Hera. "I don't know. Looks like they are out to kill." She moved backwards trying to shield Cora away from them, and just then Hera caught whiff of something. An amazing scent. It filled us up, and it smelt heavenly. It smelt woody, like pine cones with a hint of lavender. I didn't even know what to describe it with. It was simply unique. Could it be? A huge black wolf jumped in front of us, staging himself between us and the warriors. It was the biggest wolf I had ever seen. It looked majestic as his fur shone under the moonlight. It turned to us, staring at us with those gleaming black eyes, and it was like the world stopped for a moment. And then Hera said the word that I never expected. "Mate." "Mate." I questioned, staring at the huge black wolf taking in his scent as he watched us intently. "Mate." Hera wagged her tail in excitement and instantly dashed towards him. "Hera, no." I tried to stop her, but it was too late. She had reached him now. He was much taller and huger than we were. And she moved closer to him, nuzzling his neck with ours. Sparks. We felt them as our furs met, and Hera purred in pleasure. I could sense the wolf tense and the other warriors growl, watching us. "Back down, mutt." The huge wolf barked at us, causing us to whimper in shock and withdraw away from him. "What is going on? He is our mate," Hera sobbed. "He hates us." "What is happening again, Nyx?" "I don't know," I said to her as I saw his dark house blaze with anger. He snarled at us, causing Hera to jump back again, and then he began to pace towards us menacingly, with his snarls worsening. He was very close to us and got us cornered near a tree when he stopped and looked like he was fighting within himself. "Shift, mutt," he growled. Hera growled back at him, not minding the powerful aura coming from him. "What the hell are you doing, challenging him? He would kill us." I attacked her as I knew he would be extra powerful, and it seems like we were playing with death if we disobeyed. I had never experienced such an aura before. I said shift. He snarled at us again, and I forcefully took over Hera and shifted into my human form. He looked at me as I hid my face and tried to shield my nudity from him, but I knew the other wolves there couldn't see me because he was blocking me from their view. "Your face," he growled. "I want to see it." I removed my hands coyly and watched as his eyes raked over my entire form, and I felt very insecure and ugly knowing how my body looked like. "He doesn't want us." Hera howled in pain. "No one wants us, Hera." I told her, "No one. Shift back." He barked again, turning his face away from me, and I shifted back into my wolf form, feeling really hurt that he turned. I understood. I was too ugly and displeasing to look at. Alpha Titan had always said that if I was pretty and had nice unscarred skin, Alpha Titan would have wanted me and treated me right. Even this present mate of mine, whom I didn't know his name, would have too. If I was beautiful, he would have nuzzled us back and not bark at us like we were some abomination. Cora ran up to where we were, and we all watched as the huge, majestic black wolf went back to what seemed like his pack members. They all bowed as he reached them except one in particular. It was a white wolf, and I knew she was female. She walked over to him, prancing proudly in jealousy, and hurt washed over Hera and I as she touched paws with him. He nuzzled her, and what seemed to be a grin appeared on her face before she stepped back. He stood there, and it looked like he was mind-linking them. And after a long while they nodded and began to move towards us. The huge black wolf didn't follow. He just turned, taking one last look at us before howling and sprinting into the other side of the forest and disappearing into darkness. "You are coming with us, filthy rouge." The white wolf growled at us and Hera stepped back, but that didn't do anything. They continued advancing towards us. "Step back one more time and I will end you and that miserable-looking pup of yours," Cora whined, hiding beneath us. We didn't take any other step either, toward or backwards. They moved to us, barking out orders for us to move. We couldn't do anything than to obey, and we followed them blindly as they led us to where we knew not. We walked for a very long time, and the night only got darker. We never stopped to rest. Surprisingly, these wolves looked like they hadn't even gone through a very rigorous journey. Hera tried to catch up with them. Her paws were getting weaker, and they had cuts as she had stepped on thorns in a bid to catch up with them. She stepped into another thorn and howled in pain. "Move, mutt." The same white she-wolf looked back at us with a growl. "Move," Cora whined at her harshness. She was beside us and was having it hard. "Silence that pup of yours, or I will give her something to whine about." She barked at us, causing Cora to yelp. We continued the journey, and soon we reached a field with neatly mowed grass. Something told me that we were nearing the pack house. We got into the field and began passing through it, and soon a large castle-like house came into my view. As we got closer, the house became bigger, and I could see other houses scattered around it, but they were small compared to the one that caught my attention. We continued, and soon we were very close to the big house now. "Stop!" the white she-wolf ordered and turned towards us, and then the other wolves nodded at her, which she returned equally. She casted a very mean glance in my direction before sprinting off into the other direction. Some of the wolves left too, and we were left with two other she-wolves. They led us through a path that took us behind the building, and when we got there, we were taken down a narrow passageway, and I knew instantly that we were being led to the cells. "What do you think they are going to do with us?" I asked Hera as we moved following their lead, "and do you think he is going to reject us?" "I don't know what they will do with us, but I do know that I can't stand any more torture. We were barely hours free from Alpha Titan's clutches only to land in a deeper mess," she said. "And as for our mate, I don't know what he is going to do, but when I rubbed against him, I sensed acceptance before resentment. I don't know if he's going to reject us, Nyx. I am so pained and broken cause when I sensed him. I thought we would be free, and finally happy only to see that he hates us too, and he might be worse than our ex-mate." I listened intently to Hera. She had let out all she felt in one breath, and I had nothing to say to her that would comfort her as I was going through the same pain myself. We were led into a room, and the two wolves shifted and put their clothes on before commanding us to shift. We shifted and got our sacks flung at us. I immediately dressed Amara and handed her Fluffy to calm her down, as she was on the verge of tears, before putting on some clothes myself. After we did that, they took us to our cell, and we passed by lots of cells filled with rogues and maybe people who crossed the Alpha. They all looked haggard and shifty. I noticed that the cells on the same row had a bit of distance between them, but you could see the occupants of the adjacent cells. Amara and I were taken to the cell at the very end of the row and pushed into it. The cell bars were slammed shut and locked. I watched as the two female warriors left us. I collapsed to the ground immediately due to weakness after I had laid Amara on the thin bed which was in the cell. I wanted so badly to cry, but I couldn't. I had no strength for tears anymore. The wounds all over my body ached and were still bleeding profusely. The tedious journey we had to go through to get here only made it worse. Hera. I tried reaching out to my wolf. Can you heal us? No. She whined. I am too weak after everything. I will need a lot of time. I nodded at her mentally and cut off the connection. I looked over to the bed to see that Amara had fallen fast asleep with Fluffy still clutched in her hand. I lay there on the floor, wondering what exactly was going on in my life. I had so many questions. Did the moon goddess hate me this much? Why am I the cursed silver wolf? Why do I get a second chance mate only to be unwanted again? Who is he? What pack is this? Is he a very terrible alpha? Will he reject me or be worse than Alpha Titan? Will I ever actually find happiness like I always dreamt of? I wish I had immediate answers to the questions, bugging me as I laid there thinking about my situation. I am sorry, Hera, I whispered. What for? She asked. I am sorry that you are stuck with a pathetic human like me who no one wants. I sniffed. You deserve better. Shut up, Nyx, she said. And I could tell that she rolled her eyes. I love that you are my human, and you are much more than you think. Go to sleep, please. We need the strength for later as they might decide to torture us. I nodded at her words and decided to close my eyes, hoping to slip into slumber's embrace. Why? I was awoken by a noise, and I sat up to see a figure standing in front of the cell with a plate in one hand and a bottle of water in the other. The light streaming from the window indicated that it was already dawn. Well, are you just going to sit there looking like a lost fool? The person before my cell said, highly irritated. Come get this thing out of my hands. I have got other things to do than to serve a good plate to a rouge. She spat and threw the bottled water into the cell. I instantly scrambled up and grabbed the plate as she slid it under the bars, harshly causing sand particles to enter as the action rose dust. Don't know why I got to feed that stupid rouge, I heard her mutter as she stomped away, angrily causing murmur amongst the other inmates. I took the plate up and looked at its contents. It was meat soup, and a very meaty soup at that made my stomach grumble in delight. I had never seen a more appetizing food being served to me in my entire life, and it smelled heavenly too. It was filled with meat, and I could hardly see the liquid in the bowl. Amara would love this. I smiled to myself as I set aside the bowl to go wake her up. I walked to the bed and touched her lightly. She awoke with a yawn and rubbed her eyes without opening them. I had a very bad dream, Mommy, that we were put in a cell and... She stopped talking as she realized that I was never a dream and that we were actually in a cell. And with that she erupted in tears. It is okay, baby. I drew her close in a hug. Don't cry, love, it will be okay. Will we ever be happy? She sobbed. They brought food, I said to her, avoiding her question as I didn't have an answer for it. Meat. She smiled excitedly as I set the bowl before her. She didn't waste time in gobbling up everything, leaving me with nothing. I wasn't bothered with that. I was used to the hunger and I had to make sure that my baby was well fed. After the very early breakfast, we sat down on the bed, huddled together, silently awaiting our fate, when we heard a familiar voice spewing curses and feet being stomped angrily. She reached my cell and slid some blankets under it with a frown. I do not know when rouges started being wonderfully cared for, she said in a low mumble before storming off. I got off from the bed and moved to take the blankets. They were very soft and furry. Although thin, we could use them. Not like we had any where we came from. A rouge prisoner being treated like a princess. I heard a voice snort, and I looked up to see it came from the cell opposite me. I couldn't see who was in it well enough, but I knew that it was a male's voice. You must be a special one. The person continued, and this time around, he stood up and walked over to his cell bars. I could see his dirty face now, with a mass of dirty blonde hair adorning his head. I am not special, I mumbled. Who are you? A prisoner just like you only. That I haven't found favor with the king as you had seemed to have done. What king are you talking about? I looked at him like he had grown extra heads. Surely he didn't know what he was talking about. The king, of course, he snorted. You are playing games with me, right? Number. I shook my head. Where am I, please? Where is this place? This is the Black Moon Pack, he explained. It is headed by the Alpha King. What Alpha King? I was stunned, not knowing what he was talking about. You know, the fearless, the courageous. He snorted again. Lycus Dardanos, the Alpha, and also the Alpha King, king of all alphas. What is he like? I asked, taking my seat on the bed next to Amara. I have heard of the Alpha King before, but I had never met him. I don't know. He shrugged. Intense black eyes, and his wolf is a black wolf, very huge, gleaming dark eyes. Black huge wolf. The words reeled in my head as the man kept talking, but I couldn't hear him anymore, as realization had just dawned on me that I was in the territory of the Alpha King, who so happened to be my mate. Nix is, Pau V, is he ever going to come meet me? I wondered about my mate as I sat down on the cold prison floor drawing patterns in the sand. With my fingers. I have been here for over a week now or more. I am not sure. I lost track of the days and the more we stayed. I noticed that the comfort we were provided were taken away too. We didn't have a mattress anymore, nor the blankets, neither the meals that came in often. Amara and I were starving, and we craved for food more than we ever had in our entire lives. Even the petty thin bread and soup given to other prisoners didn't get to us anymore, and I wondered if it was his new method of tormenting us. Hey Nix. I looked up and saw Andros already standing close to his cell bars. Here you go, he said, flinging the bottle of water in his hand towards my cell. He had a very good throw. It landed very near as always. Thank you. I mumbled as I went to pick it up. Thank you very much. I took the bottle and went back to where Amara was seated. She looked up at me as I crouched next to her. She had become thinner due to lack of food. I opened the bottle and gave it to her to drink from. This had become our routine ever since we stopped getting food. Andros giving us his water and I handing it all to Amara. He had been of great help. At first I never liked him since he kept bugging me of what relationship I had with the king, and I didn't trust him since he was a rogue. But I got used to him, and he was the only one I could talk to since our cells were opposite each other. Although, I still fear him since he is a man, but he couldn't do me any harm. We got bars between us and a bit of distance. I watched as Amara emptied the whole bottle of water and kept it aside. She wiped her hand over her mouth and looked at me. What about you, Mummy? She asked, looking at me with worry in her eyes. You always give me everything. Don't worry, baby. I smiled sadly at her. I will be okay, you know. I just want you not to go really hungry. She nodded at me and looked down at Fluffy. We will be okay, right, Fluffy? She smiled at it. Fluffy says we will be okay, Mummy. She looked up at me. I know, child. I know. I nodded at her and went back to my sitting position. I couldn't tell her that it couldn't talk, and I couldn't tell her that we would probably die here if we went on like this. What are you thinking about? I looked up again. It was Andros. Nothing. I sighed. What were you put in here for? I asked him, changing the subject. I didn't want him to drill me for questions or try to get into my thoughts. A lot of things, he said. Very scary things. Like what? You don't want to know, kid. Don't call me kid. I growled at him and he laughed. You are only barely older than me. You do not know that, he argued. So? How old are you then? About 400 years old, he said, and I gasped in shock. He couldn't be that old. He looked really young. You speak no truth, I argued. What are you, a vampire? I questioned him with a laugh. Actually, half werewolf and half vampire, he said, and I stared at him in amazement. I had never met a hybrid. Shocked, he laughed, and I nodded. So what are you in for? I asked again, and this time he sighed before looking downwards. I am here because someone hates me. He laughed dryly. I don't want to talk about it. Oh. I played with my fingers. And your mate, isn't she worried? She died 100 years ago. He mumbled. I am sorry, I said to him, not knowing how to console him any further. It is okay. He sighed. At least I got a taste of what loving someone was like, and she was the most wonderful person I have ever met. I smiled at him, still not knowing what to say, as I wondered if I will ever get a feeling of what loving someone or being loved was like. I looked over at Amara and saw that she had fallen asleep. My stomach growled in hunger, bringing me back to reality. What are you in for? It was Andros's turn to ask me this time. What must you have done to be held captive with your child? His voice was teasing. I stopped, not knowing if I wanted him to know the reality of things. Did I trust him enough to know? Was I ready to tell him anything? I am here because someone hates me too. You are lying, he laughed. You are his mate, aren't you? My heart skipped a beat as I heard his words, and my breathing increased rapidly. How did he know? I never told him anything. No, I am not his mate, I lied. I am just here 'cause someone hates me. You are lying. I am not Andros. I wasn't happy with the fact that he knew. How many other people know? I questioned myself. What if he thinks I told everyone and then comes down here to kill me? If you are not his mate, why do I hear him coming in this direction, with various warriors on guard saying, Your Highness? She is in the last cell. Shit. I am fucked. I could hear the greetings too, with heavy thumping of feet. His scent wafted through my nostrils, and I felt pleasure fill me, which was soon overcome by fear. Gosh. What is he going to do, Hera? First time we are meeting him in person, and I don't know what will happen, I said to Hera. I am scared too, Nyx, she said, sounding really tired from the lack of food. The wolfsbane and silver in our system kept weakening her more over time. He is really close now. And oh, I saw your face when you perceived him. Don't lie to me. Andros smirked and withdrew into the darker part of the cell. His footsteps got closer and closer. In panic, I stood up immediately and went into the darker part of the cell next to Amara and laid next to her, pretending to be asleep. He was before my cell now, and his scent filled my nostrils more. And I heard his feet stop. Wow. Hera purred. Fuck, he smells heavenly. I rolled my eyes at her and laid there. I could agree with her. He did smell like heaven, if only he behaved like an angel to match his scent. I know you aren't asleep. His voice boomed. It was so deep and pleasant to hear. I almost purred along with Hera. Come forward, he commanded, but I remained where I was. I said, come forward. He spat with a growl, and I hurried to my feet with my head bent and walked forward to meet him. I didn't dare look up. I kept staring down at his well-polished shoes, and I noticed that he had huge feet from how big the shoes were. Look at me, he said. Don't make me repeat myself. His voice was harsh, just like Alpha Titan's, and I shivered in fear and took a step back. He reached his hand through the bars and grabbed me, pulling me closer to him. I felt sparks run up my arm, and I know he felt them too. When I talk to you, you do as I say, he gritted before pulling his hand away like he just touched filth. Now fucking look at me. I looked up to see his face. He was damn tall for a start, taller than most men I had met. If it was possible for good looks to be a crime, he would be hung. Damn, I had never met someone like this. He had short black hair which was swept backwards. His skin was tanned with a nice-shaped face, well-arched brows, deep black orbs just like when we first met. His nose was pointed, and his lips were well-shaped with a pale shade of pink. I suddenly wanted to know what his smile was like, and he had a slight stubble. I wanted to reach out my hand, to touch him, and know what he felt like, which I did. A very stupid mistake. Keep your fucking hands to yourself. He glared at me and I withdrew with a sob. Why? I finally found the courage to talk. We are mates. We can't be. Not again. I mumbled. What do you mean by not again? He moved closer to the cell. Tell me, why don't you want me? I asked, changing the topic. I didn't want to tell him that I had a mate before. Because you are an omega. A rogue. You are weak and pathetic. Probably a whore too, cause I know not where the hell you got that child from. I am not a whore. My voice broke as I began to cry from his mean words. What is your name? He asked. Nix. Nix? What? Nix Evander. Good, he hummed. I am going to reject you, he said, and I felt a stabbing pain in my chest. I wanted to beg him not to tell him that I will do anything for him not to reject me, and you are going to accept my rejection and forget about me. We can never be together. I am an alpha king. I do not need a mate like you. I cried more as his words rolled off his tongue. Stop your crying. It is fucking irritating, he said, and I sobbed. You are going to leave after the rejection and never set foot within my territory again. Mutt, he warned. Is that clear? I nodded at him and watched him do what I feared the most. Lycus Dardanos, he began, Alpha King of the werewolf community, the next in command after the Wolf's Council and the Alpha of Black Moon Pack, reject you Nix E. He never got to finish his words as a blinding white light suddenly shone through the cells, followed with a harsh gush of wind that threw me back against the wall. Nix. Ease, P-U-E. I groaned in pain as I got hit against the wall. The pain tore through my back, and I could swear that I felt my posterior bones crack. I opened my eyes, trying to see as the light had began to fade away a bit. I looked to my side to see Amara still snuggled in deep sleep, which left me wondering how she could sleep through all the commotion. Are you okay? Lycus's voice pulled my gaze away from Amara, and it trailed to him. He was getting up on his feet, which meant that he had taken a fall too. Are you hurt? He asked again, and I saw something flash in his eyes, worry. I was too stunned to answer, as I never expected him to actually care about how I felt. The worry in his voice and eyes was quickly gone, and he looked away from me towards the direction of the source of light, and I followed suit. It seemed that all the streams and streaks of light that faded away had amassed into a huge mass of light, and in the middle, a hole was suddenly created, and out of the hole came another gush of wind. This time it was gentle. It actually swept through my hair, caressing the tresses, and out stepped a woman. Immediately I laid eyes on her. I suddenly felt insecure and embarrassed. I knew I could never look like her. That is why no one would ever want me. She was the most beautiful woman I had ever seen. She had long, luscious brown hair that was waist length. Her skin was caramel toned and literally glowed. She had an oval-shaped face with the cutest yet most sensual features, and her eyes were of a pale-colored red, which got me to know that she was a witch. She wore a very sheer gown that hung to her every curve. She wasn't sickly thin, unlike me. She had an ample bosom, a very tiny waist, and full-flared hips. She was simply gorgeous, and I looked down at myself, and tears began to flow, knowing that I would never ever look like that. Her skin glowed, unlike mine that was bloody and covered with marks, and she had a very attractive figure, while I was skinny, more than skinny, with my bones sticking out. What are you doing here, Faye? I heard my mate speak. Even her name is beautiful, just like her. I sighed. Why do you sound like you are not happy to see me? She said with a pout as her feet touched the ground. Even her voice was wonderful. Don't you miss me, love? Love. How dare she call him love? Hera growled in my head. Let me out, I will rip her throat. Calm down, Hera, I said to her. It is not like he wants us. I do not get why you are agitated. Of course, I got why she was agitated. I was filled with jealousy myself. She literally just called my mate love, and I was curious about the relationship between them. Faye, he sighed. What do you want? A little birdie told me you have found your mate. She smirked, walking closer to my cell. I came to see for myself. Where is she? She asked. How did you find me? Lycus asked her with a bored look on his face. And how is all these any of your concern? I found you how I have always find you, my love. I am no witch for a reason. Besides, all of these concerns me. After all, I wouldn't want anyone coming close to my man. She placed a lot of emphasis on the last part of her sentence, and I was hurt beyond reason as I wondered if he was sleeping with her. Lycus snorted. Where is she? She asked, getting closer to the cell. Oh, there she is. Her eyes found mine as she was very close now and standing next to my mate. She looks awful. I bowed my head in shame at her words and fiddled with my worn-out dress. She was right. I'd look awful. The Alpha King's mate in a cell, she said out loud. How wonderful. Can you stop yelling? He grimaced at her. Bring your voice down. Oh, do not worry. She winked at him. No one will know that you had your pathetic mate locked up in a cell. Everyone is asleep as per my powers. I saw my mate sigh in relief, and I couldn't blame him. I wouldn't even want me if I were him. I had scars all over my body and inscriptions. I was cursed and pathetic. Not pretty at all, too thin and utterly worthless. What exactly do you want, Faye? He did an eye roll. Why are you here? I came to make a proposition. She winked at him and moved closer to him. Way too close. And you must agree to it. And what proposition is that? You know how crazy I am for you. She placed a hand on his chest, caressing it softly. And I will do anything to have you, either by seduction, my charms, or witchery. I felt a sharp ting in my heart, hearing her words and seeing how she was all over my mate. He didn't even bother pushing her away. And if do not agree to this deal of yours. He looked down at her, raising a brow. What will happen? I will harm that silly-looking mate of yours. She spat directly, a glare at me. I will grant her so much pain she would wish she was dead. I do not care what you do with her. He told her. Whatever you do to her is none of my business. I didn't know what to feel at this moment. Seeing that my mate didn't care about me one bit, I felt tears roll down my cheeks again, and I sniffed. Oh, hear her whimpering at your blatant distaste for her. She laughed as she heard my sobs. This would be easier than I thought. You should leave now, Faye. My mate said to her. I have a lot of things to do than strike a deal over someone I could care less about. You are mine, Lycus, she said, it rubbing lazy patterns on his chest. I will have you be it by hook or crook, she said, maintaining eye contact with me while littering kisses along his jawline. Hera howled in pain and jealousy, while I just sat there crying, wondering why he never bothered to push her away. Come with me, Lycus. She kissed his neck. You know you want to, he growled. Lowly, I will make you feel good just like old times. She whispered, but still loud enough for me to hear. Fine, he grunted. She smiled at him before turning to smirk at me with a glare, and before I could even blink, they were gone with no trace of them. And it was like they were never there before. I couldn't stop the tears from falling, and I fell back to the floor sobbing with a sad tune in my head as I replayed all what had just happened. That night, Andros had given us a piece of bread after my resistance had failed. I wouldn't want you dying on me. he had said as he flung the bread towards us. It had landed on the floor as usual, and I had picked it up, dusted the sand off it, and handed it to Amara, which she accepted with glee after going without food for days. I was seated against the wall as her watched my daughter sleep. My stomach grumbled, catching my attention. I hadn't had food in days, and I wondered how I was still alive. Maybe it was because I was already used to hunger. Hera was getting weaker with each passing moment, and I had almost began to lose connection with her. My gaze went back to Amara, and I saw how she snuggled closely with her tiny hands hugging her knees, indicating that she was cold. I stood up and walked to her, doing what I had on my mind. I pulled off my dress and spread it on her to provide her with warmth, leaving me in my panties and bra, shivering as the cold air hit my skin as I walked back to my sitting positions. "You are somewhat quiet today," I heard Andros say, accompanied with footsteps indicating that he was coming towards his cell bars. "What is up with you?" "Nothing," I chattered. "Why aren't you asleep yet?" I asked him, not wanting him to drill me for more answers. "Good Lord, Nix," he suddenly screeched. "What the fuck happened to your body? Stop looking at me." I shifted backwards, highly alarmed and ashamed that he had seen me. "How did you even see me?" "I am a hybrid Nix," he said. "I used night vision. We have that. Now who in the hell did that?" "I don't want to talk about it," I sighed. "Go to bed." "Why are you sadder than usual?" he asked. "Is it your mate?" I looked down, knowing I had to say something before he tried to keep figuring me out. "No one wants me, Andros," I sobbed. "No one likes me even. I am cursed, weak, ugly, and pathetic." "Hey Nix, that is not true," he said to me. "I like you a lot." "Lies," I chanted in my head. "Thank you," I said, not knowing how to respond to his statement. "I should go to bed now." "Good night," he said after me, but I didn't bother saying it back. I just walked over to where Amara was and joined her on the floor with my hands wrapped tightly around me as if it'd provide me with warmth. I lay there thinking of all what had happened with my mate and the witch, and I reached a conclusion that I had to get out of here and hoped that I could start plotting my exit plan. The sweet embraces of sleep took me with my dreams filled with a pretense life of happiness and a mate who actually wanted me. Lycus's PUV. I had left the pack house that morning, having slight thoughts of my mate. Something kept pulling me to go down to see her, but I resisted the urge and proceeded with my movement. I couldn't let some stupid pull towards her waste my time. I had alpha duties. I had a meeting with leaders of other were creatures, and I couldn't let my insignificant mate ruin my plans. I kept having this bad feeling in my guts as we began the journey, but I could care less. I had left my beta Laya in charge of the pack. Nothing could go wrong. "I have this bad feeling," Spyro had told me as I questioned him about his uneasiness, but I threw his response aside. Halfway through the journey, I just had to order the convoy to turn around. The discomfort and bad feeling was now too strong for me to ignore, and when we had reached the pack house and I caught her scent only to perceive blood also, I saw red. I had shifted into my wolf and raced to the prisons. The smell of her blood grew stronger as I traced it to the torture room and went through the door only to find out that one of the guards was before my mate, forcing himself on her. I had given him the leniency of a few words before pouncing on him and ripping his head off. I turned to my mate and snarled, seeing the state she was in, and instantly she had passed out. Now, I was running towards the pack hospital with her limp form in my arms. Blood continually seeped from her wounds, staining my arms, and I picked up my pace, using my wolf speed trying to hasten up. I got into the pack hospital and raced towards the emergency room, which I had mind-linked them to clear earlier. The doctors gave way as I hurried into the room and placed her on the bed, but with my arms still holding her. I gazed down at her. Her face was ashen and bloodied, and so was the rest of her body. "Your Highness," the head doctor said to me, and I snapped her head up at her with a glare. You have to step aside for us to attend to her. Her voice was pleading. No. I barked at her. I am not leaving her. My hold on Nyx's body tightened and I could feel her grow cold. Alpha, please, you need to step back. The doctor pleaded further, but I ignored her and looked down at my mate. The hate I felt for her was overcome with care. Maybe it was because of the mate bond, or because I didn't want her to die, as that would make me weak. It was not like I cared about the Omega. I moved my hand to her neck and felt it. There was no pulse. I did it again. Still no pulse. You have got to do something. I barked at the head doctor. She is losing blood. She has no pulse. Don't just stand there, fucking do something. You need to leave, please, Alpha, for her sake. She pleaded again, and this time I obeyed. I reluctantly withdrew my hands and stepped back as they immediately hovered around her to work their magic. I couldn't keep standing there to see them try to revive her. I had to leave, and that was what I did. I walked out of the emergency unit hoping that she would survive, as I didn't want to be weak and vulnerable if she happened to die. I sat in my office working through some papers when I heard a knock at the door. Come in. I growled, and the door opened. In walked in one of the pack nannies with my mate's daughter sauntering behind her. She didn't look haggard and dirty like when I last saw her. She was clean now and was wearing a flowering dress with her now clean teddy bear clutched in her hands. And I noticed that she bore resemblance with my mate a lot. She was as beautiful as her mother. So you think the mate you hate is beautiful now? My subconscious snarled at me. Why did you bring her here? I questioned the nanny, shaking the voice away. Is anything the matter? She has been crying for her mother, Your Highness, the woman said. And I rolled my eyes. She says she misses her. I couldn't blame the kid. It has been almost a week since she last saw Nyx, and I knew that she would definitely miss her terribly. I waved my hand at the nanny, indicating for her to excuse us. She left the office, and I turned my gaze to the little girl standing in fright before me. Your mother is fine, I said, trying to be sweet, which was a very horrible attempt. You will see her soon. I had to tell her what I thought were soothing words, as I didn't know how to console a kid, neither was I good with kids. Why do you hate me and my mommy? Her small voice came, and I stood up from my seat and walked towards her, which got her crying, so I had to halt in my tracks. I looked at the crying child before me with my fists balled by my side as I didn't know what to do. This was super awkward for me. I don't hate you, I said. You put us in prison with no food. She sniffed. Mummy and I want to be happy. It is time for you to go, I said, and mind-linked the nanny. I needed her gone as I couldn't bear or handle children. The nanny came quick and took her away, leaving me back in my office. I walked back to the table and sat to do some paperwork as I wanted to get off what just happened from my mind, when the door was suddenly opened, and in walked my mum. I snorted. She was the only one who entered without knocking, and I wasn't ready to argue on that. When last did you check on your mate like us? She attacked me. That poor girl is lying there on that bedding for her life, and you relax here doing nothing. I gave her daughter a nice room and saved her life, Mum. I palmed my face. How is that doing nothing? Why are you acting like this, son? I want nothing to do with her. I spat. When will you quit it, Mum? I know just what you are about to say. I growled at her. I would have nothing to do with her ever. She isn't what I want, and I despise her the most, and you know why. I said to her. So what are you going to do when she wakes? Banish her? She scoffed. Like us, you need your mate, she continued. You must care, only so that I don't end up weak if anything happens to her in her state. I said to my stunned mum, and when she awakes we might have to go through with the rejection. My mother was about to say something else, when the door opened, and rushed in one of the guards at the hospital. What happened? I asked him, already fearing something terrible. The Omega. Alpha. Speak up, boy, my mum said to him, and he immediately did as he was told. She is awake, Your Highness. Nix is, Po-E. Okay. My voice was shaky when I spoke as I wondered what was it he wanted to talk about. Is he about to complete his rejection? What is he going to say? And if he goes on with the rejection, what will happen to Amara and I? Are you paying me any attention? He snapped, and I was instantly pulled from my thought zone. Pay attention to me. Yes, Alpha. I nodded and listened to him, trying not to zone out again. You will listen and obey me carefully, Nix, he said. Just obey me if you do not want this done the hard way. My mind skipped a bit knowing what he wanted, and I tried to be calm. I will have to obey him and please him, so as not to earn his wrath and do things the hard way. I nodded and dropped to my knees in front of him before taking my hands up and fiddling with his belt. What in God's name are you doing? He gritted harshly, pulling back from me with force. What the hell is wrong with you? I stood up, wondering why he was angry. Maybe he meant the second reason, and stood up from the floor, slid my dress over my head. I wasn't having anything under, and so I was stark naked. I promise not to scream, I said, climbing the bed and laying face front on it. I will obey and be a good girl. What the fuck, Nix? He looked shocked and appalled. Get down and put your clothes on. He had turned his back on me now, with his hands fisted by his side. Now he barked. I hurriedly sprang into action as I tried not to upset him any further. He obviously wanted to use me, but seeing my body, he didn't want anything from me. I felt dejected. I am done, Alpha, I said, and he turned to look at me. I couldn't decipher his emotions as they were somewhat masked, but I knew he still hated me. I wondered if his wolf did too. Why did you do that? He asked me. I thought that was what you wanted, I said to him, 'cause any time I had ever heard the word obey from men, and they talked about me not wanting it the hard way, it was always about me pleasuring them, or them using me for their pleasure. I will never want that from you. He sighed, and I was hurt. My mate didn't want me sexually or in any other way. What was it you wanted then? I wanted to talk about me rejecting you, he said, and I began to shiver at the fear of being rejected again. I closed my eyes and tried to calm down. Why don't you want me? I muttered. Please don't reject me. I will do anything. Isn't it obvious? He chuckled, mocking me. You aren't fit for a king like me, and I can't imagine myself being mated to someone like you. Have you seen yourself, Nikes? I stammered. I can try. He laughed again. You can barely stand up for yourself. You couldn't even defend yourself from that male warrior. I had to come save you. I just kept quiet, looking at him. I fought to keep my tears from flowing as his words hurt. They cut through me like a dagger, and worse still, I felt some sort of attraction for him. Here is what will happen. Like us, I said, stopping him. Then I reached out to touch his hand, feeling the tingly sparks. How dare you? He growled, pinning me with my neck against the wall. It all happened in a flash. You will never address me by my name. It is Alpha to you, he growled, and I whimpered. Don't ever fucking try to touch me, mutt. We can never be a thing. Neither mates nor lovers. Don't even think the mate bond will work some magic. It has no fucking effect on me. Know your place and stay put there. I nodded, and he released his hold, causing me to slither down the floor to the wall. He backed away from me and sighed. I won't reject you, he said. And I didn't know if to trust him. And I won't harm you, he added, and I didn't know if to believe his words. He just showed me that he was just like Alpha Titan. I nodded at him. I can't reject you cause it will make me weaker, and then I won't be able to function properly as king, and I can't let that happen cause of some pathetic omega. He glared at me. I will let you live here, and you must be in your room at all times. No one should know we are mates. I will grant you whatever comfort you wish for, and anything I can do within my powers. But you have to stay out of my way, stay away from me, and act like you do not know me. I gulped as all hope of ever being loved by him was thrown out the window by his last statement. Always remember that I am only keeping you for my power, and we can never ever be a thing. A king can't function without his queen or Luna. I reminded him, and he looked shocked that I had spoken back to him. I was even shocked myself. That has got a simple solution. He smirked. If I ever feel the need to have a queen, I would choose a strong female to mate with. I felt Hera whimper in pain, and I was surprised as I haven't sensed her due to our weakness. I guess his hurtful words had brought her back. He hates us too, Hera, I said to her. I am sorry. I am sorry you are stuck with an abomination like me. You deserve better. You deserve to be loved. I got no answer from her. I guess she agreed with me this time, as she would usually counter my thoughts. I hope you adhere strictly to my rules, and if you don't, you wouldn't love to bear my wrath. He threatened. Yes, Alpha. I bowed my neck at him. I will do as you wish. He turned at my words and moved to leave the room. I raised my head watching his figure as he left, when I suddenly remembered something that I had to ask for. He had said that I could get anything I wanted as long as it is within his power. I hoped he grants this request. I am about to make, Alpha? I called after him. What? He turned to me. Make it snappy. I have a request. It had better be reasonable. He growled at me. Out with it. I want Andros to be released.